Hey, Mo Hashim here with Flat Fee Landlord Property Management, serving the Houston area. Video today, I'm going to discuss 5 things you should consider before you rent out your rental home, okay? Now again, whether you're a real estate investor that has multiple properties, or if you're just a landlord or a soon-to-be landlord because you just owned a home that you bought yourself and you find yourself in a situation where you may want to rent out your home. These are 5 things you're going to want to consider before you actually jump both feet in and commit to renting out your property. First thing you want to consider before you actually rent out your property is whether you should. All right, simple enough. You've got really 2 options, really 3 when it comes down to it. Do you want to continue living in the property if you do live in the property, or do you want to sell it, basically wiping your hands clean of it and not having to deal with it any longer? Or do you want to rent it out and have tenants in there and basically keep that property in your portfolio and continue owning it? So that's the number 1 thing you want to consider. You really know best. Everybody's going to be a little bit different about their own specific situation, whether you have the time, funds, experience, or willingness to even do a rental, or if you don't, sell it, or if you can't sell it because you don't have the equity to be able to do so, continue living in it. That's gonna go by an individual case-by-case basis. So think of those 3 things obviously before you move forward. Once you have made the decision to rent out your property, the next thing you want to consider is going to be the cash flow that you're going to get on that property. So cash flow, if you're not familiar with that term, it's big in real estate investing. It is the amount of rent that you collect minus all expenses associated with renting out that property, minus your debt service, which is also known as, could be known as your mortgage. Okay, so once you take the total rent that you get and subtract the total expenses, mortgage, what is left over is going to be amount of cash flow that you get. Now that can be either a positive number or a negative number. And rule of thumb is if it's a negative number, you may really want to reconsider using it as a rental. If it's a positive number, that's good, but you also want to make sure when you're calculating these numbers that you're being realistic with the amount of rent that you think you're going to get. Use market value, don't overestimate. With expenses, you don't want to be conservative in terms of not thinking worst case scenarios are going to happen, because more likely than not they are going to happen. So make sure you account for anything. Be real aggressive when it comes to what expenses may come up. And then your mortgage, that's a fixed rate, so that's something that shouldn't change unless you refinance to a lower rate. But that's something, again, that you're going to want to know on an individual case-by-case basis, okay? So cash flow. Does it cash flow? And if it does it hit the target cash flow that you're looking for as a real estate investor or a landlord? Is it worth it to hold on to that property? That leads me to the next thing that you want to consider before you actually even end up renting anything is this a good rental property, okay? Now, just because it's a piece of real estate and it's a home doesn't make it a good rental, okay? And things that you want to consider that make a piece of real estate a good rental are, is it in rental condition, okay? Are there a lot of high-end things in this home that could break easily, that could really go down in value over years of wear and tear? Or is it something that's pretty standard? Like, for example, it's got laminate flooring, granite countertops, things that can withstand the time and the wear and tear of having a tenant in that property, so you're not having to every basically year or every 2 years have to go back through and fix, or like, for example, if it's carpet, you don't want to go back through and replace the carpet every so often. So that's one thing you want to consider that makes it a good rental. Something else you may want to consider is could your money do better somewhere else, okay? So if you have like a large home, large expensive home that you're renting out, you really want to look at what we call return on investment, okay? So if you put that same amount of equity or money that you put in that home in a really big home, if you take that out and put it into a bunch of smaller homes, could you get a higher return on investment in the money you put down versus one big property with one tenant versus multiple smaller properties or less valued properties with more tenants, okay? And the good thing about that is you're kind of diversifying. Even though you're still in real estate, you're kind of diversifying because you're not 100% solely committed to the income of one tenant. If you break it up into multiple smaller properties using that same amount of cash into less expensive and smaller properties, now if one tenant ends up getting backed up or doesn't pay on time or isn't the best tenant, you still have other tenants that can make payments towards the income that you would get with the one tenant. So that's something else you want to consider when considering if you should rent out your home. Another consideration you want to look into when it comes to real estate is, do I think this property will appreciate over time? Okay, are you in a location that shows promise? Is the economy strong? Does it have a history of the value of real estate going up over time? Now, most real estate does, but there are times, like for example, the Great Recession, where real estate fell. But on top of recessions, you also want to look at the rate of rise that appreciation happens. There are different areas within not only the country, but even within our own region that appreciate higher than others. A lot of times the more urban, more populated areas seem to appreciate a little bit higher than the ones that are out in the suburbs. So you want to look, does it appreciate, and does it have a historical appreciation value that's acceptable for what you're looking over time, because real estate really is a long-term investment. All right, one of the last things, but really one of the most important things you want to consider before you rent out your property is, do you have the time, the experience, the patience, the knowledge of doing this yourself? Or should you contract it out to an agent, a property manager, or a property management company? All right, so if you don't have the time, but you want to hold on to that real estate, but you have a full-time job, or you're just not in the landlording business, should you contract the actual management, leasing of the home, whatever it may be? There's, different people can do different portions of the whole process. But if you don't want to do anything with it, who do you rent it? Who do you contract that out with? Obviously, your options are a real estate agent if you want to lease it or sell it. Most property managers are also licensed real estate agents, so they can also help you with leasing your home. And once that tenant has been secured, managing the home and doing the day-by-day management of the property, so you as a landlord or investor don't have to. If you don't have the time to do it, then that's something you want to research and look into. But if you do have the time to do it, then obviously that's something to look into as well and consider. So if you have any questions about any one of those things that you should ask before you rent out your home, or if you have any general questions outside of that, please feel free to reach out to us. You can go to our website at houstonpropertymanager.com or call our office.